بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So we finished with the Eid prayer, and before that we did the Friday prayer. Usually at this point there are some other prayers to be done, such as the prayer of fear and the solar and the lunar eclipse prayers. We're going to jump to the funeral prayer, partially because Ramadan is coming upon us and I want to finish the main things related to the prayer before we go into Siyam. Siyam is relatively straightforward, so we probably will only need 3 or 4 weeks to do it. I don't plan on doing any classes during Ramadan, so we want to try and finish the Fiqh of Siyam before Ramadan. If we don't get through enough, we will go into Siyam and come back to the prayer. So we're going to do the funeral prayer today. And coming to this masjid, you pray the funeral prayer on a regular occurrence because we have the funeral service downstairs. Most of the time people are not actually familiar with it. But we'll go through more detail than is what usually told to people prior to the prayer. The status of the funeral prayer is that it is fard kifaya. What does fard kifaya mean? You have to raise your hands. He rose his hands. Okay? He raised his hands. So if someone prays it, even if one person in the community prays it, then the fard is removed from everyone else. So then it is necessary that there are some people in the community that know how the funeral prayer is actually prayed. Okay? And my father tells me a story of a alim that was traveling in India, and so he got on the carriage. This is an old story, and some people stopped the carriage on the way and asked everyone to come off. So they thought, okay, this is a highway robbery, we're all going to lose our money and everything. And after they got everyone off, they asked him, do you know how to lead a funeral? Do you know how? And everyone said no. Then they came to the alim and he said, do you know how to lead a funeral prayer? He said, yes, I know how to lead a funeral prayer. So they said, okay, come with us. Everyone else can go, you have to come with us. So he went with them and they took them to the graveyard, and they had put a mark against the graves that did not have a janazah prayer done on them. He said, we have been stopping carriages for many days trying to find someone who can lead the prayer. Because there was no one to lead the prayer, we buried them. And can you pray the janazah on them? So this is, the story I tell you because there are communities out there that have no idea how to lead the janazah prayer. And, you should be prepared that not just you have to pray behind an imam, but you yourself may have to lead the janazah prayer. So sit in the class today trying to understand that concept. Just like we did all the other fiqh, we will describe the pillars, the conditions and the sunnahs, and then we'll go through some notes. Okay. The pillars of the funeral prayer are very straightforward. There are 4 takbirah. Okay. You have to be standing up in the janazah prayer. You cannot pray it sitting down. That's it. That's all the pillars of the prayer. Imam Shafi'i has 3 other pillars. He has the intention as a pillar. Is the intention a pillar in the prayer? In a regular prayer? Yes. Imam Shafi'i says, in a regular prayer, the niyyah is a rukun, right? He also says that the 2 taslima are also a rukun. Okay? So the intention, standing up for it, 4 takbirat and 2 taslima are also a rukun. And Imam Shafi'i also says that the Fatiha is a rukun as well. Alright? Imam Abu Hanifa says there's only 2 rukun. One is the takbirat and the standing. For him, the taslima is wajib. Just like in a regular prayer, the taslima is rukun for Imam Shafi and wajib for Imam Abu Hanifa. So he is similar, uses the same principles to apply it to the funeral prayer. Just like in the prayer, the intention is not a rukun for the Hanafis and it is a condition, right? So in the funeral prayer as well, it is a condition rather than a rukun. How do you do the intention for a funeral prayer? You guys have prayed in this masjid. What do you do? Sorry?
You just intend it that you're praying funeral prayer.
Okay. Anything else you can add to that?
Well, with a Hanafi probably you need to say it in your mouth like a mustahab.
Yeah, you don't need to say it with your mouth. You know, you can say it if you wish to say it with your mouth to bring yourself to attention. Yeah, you can do that, but it's not required.
Male or female?
Yeah, you know, is the mayyit a male or a female? Right?
But for intention, we don't mention the male or female.
You don't have to. The key part of the intention, I'm praying a funeral prayer. Okay? If you know that the mayyit is male or female, do you have to know?
That's for the dua.
Yeah, for the dua you have to know. Is the dua a rukun?
No.
No, right? What is the status of the dua? It is a sunnah, right? And so the imam should know because he's the imam, right? But let's say the imam for whatever reason has been told the wrong information. Will the prayer be valid?
Yes.
Why will it be valid?
The rukun is
It's not a rukun, right? Should you do it and should you know? The answer is yes. Okay. So the student of knowledge learns what is a rukun and what is a sunnah so that if something happens in the prayer, the key thing is that you know what to do. Does the prayer need to be repeated? Okay, based on this information, if you prayed a janazah prayer with 3 takbirat, is it valid or not?
no, anything, no.
All of the imams say 4 takbirat. 4 takbirat are a rukun. Okay? So if someone prayed it with 2 takbirah or 3 takbirah, it is not valid. And will come, if I don't say it at the end, remind me on what happens with the person who comes late. I have written a note, so inshallah I'll try and remember to present that. Okay, now, sorry, the standing. Now, obviously the standing is a rukun, just like a standing is a rukun in a regular prayer. So a person who is unable to stand, or he is able to stand but not for the duration of the prayer, he is not required to stand. So let's say some people can stand up, but they can only stand up for 30 seconds, after which they get tired. They're not required to stand. In fact, they should sit down, right? Because it is invalid to stand and halfway through the prayer say, I'm too tired, I'm going to sit down. Okay, because that breaks the prayer. Yes?
The standing is the same condition with the fard prayer?
Yes, yes. Same as the fard prayer, because the voluntary prayer you may sit down, right? The significant ikhtilaf then is for the Fatiha, because Imam al-Shafi and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal say that the Fatiha is a rukun. And the famous ikhtilaf is that Imam Abu Hanifa says there's no Fatiha in the funeral prayer. So when we come to the Sunnah, we'll discuss that in a bit more detail. One more thing to know is you'll go to some places and they'll say you do 1 taslima to the right and that's it. So understand this as well. The A'immat al-Thalatha, which is Imam al-Shafi, Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa, said there's 2 taslima. Okay? And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said there's 1 taslima. And there is reports of the Prophet ﷺ that he prayed 1. But even Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal says that a person may do 2 taslima. So he is not strict on the matter. Okay? Understand that, you know, the Shafi'i Imam, he can't just decide that he's going to do 1 taslima. Because for him, 2 taslima are a rukun. He has to do 2 taslima. All right, let's go to the conditions. The most obvious and first condition is that the mayyit should be Muslim. How do you decide that someone died as a Muslim? What are the guiding principles? if he killed himself, he's not a Muslim? Okay, that's a good question, and the fuqaha have not left that. If someone has done suicide, is he prayed on or not? And we will discuss that at the end. The question I asked is, how do you decide that someone is a Muslim or not?
He asked the relative.
You didn't raise your hand. Yes.
First of all, the name of the person and his family.
I just saw a patient and his name was Abdul Ahad.
Yeah, so that's like one of the signs.
Okay, but he's not a Muslim.
And then
He's not a Muslim. Even though he has that name, he's not a Muslim. Okay? There's two things, right? One is that he is known as a Muslim. Are you all Muslims? Did I check your aqidah? Did I ask you, do you know the pillars of faith? Did I ask you? No. You come here and you pray, you are known as Muslims, right? The second is that he is from a Muslim family. Okay? From a Muslim family, right? And so there isn't doubt about him being a Muslim. Now, there may be the situation that someone has a Muslim family, but one of the people has become atheist. If he has done i'lan that he is an atheist, then he is not prayed over, right? But as long as no one knows he's an atheist, just assume that he died on Islam, right? And he's prayed over. Now, okay, what about a child? If the parents are Muslims, then child is assumed to be a Muslim, right? And similarly, if the tribe is Muslim, okay, he came from Somalia, everyone in Somalia is Muslim, yes, alhamdulillah. He died in Somalia, he will be considered a Muslim, so the janazah will be done on him. The trouble becomes in certain unusual circumstances where a family is captured or a child from the kuffar is captured and he dies in the country of the Muslims. Is he prayed over or not prayed over? Because he is a child, right? And there's ikhtilaf in the matter. So, when that comes about, then you will ask a alim about that kind of situation. But the general guiding principle is that a person who died as a Muslim is prayed over. We'll come to certain discussions around murderers and robbers and suicide. We'll do that at the end, inshallah. Hopefully we can get to that today. This deceased, the second condition is that the deceased should be present. And Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik are strict on this. Imam Shafi'i says that the deceased does not have to be present. You can do what is called janazatul ghaib. Okay? So we had in this masjid, one of our brothers, their family member died and they requested that the janazah should be prayed over. And what does Imam Abu Hanifa says? Cannot be done. And Imam Shafi'i says, it can be done. Okay, so now, there's an issue here that the general population, most of the people here know the Shafi'i madhab, right? If you go to a Hanafi masjid, they'll be saying, no can do. Okay, what is the evidence behind this? The Shafi'is say that the Prophet ﷺ prayed over an-Najashi. And Najashi was not there. His body was not there when he did the janazah of Najashi, radiyallahu anhu, right? But he did not pray over the Sahaba who died outside of Medina. So all those Sahaba, for example, you remember those Sahaba that were sent out to teach the tribe and were sent as ulama and they were all killed? He did not do janazah over any of them. So the Hanafi say that on this basis, what the Prophet ﷺ did over an-Najashi was a special ruling just for him, to show the people that he had taken the Islam and that ruling was just for him. And they say that in general, the janazatul ghaib is not permitted. However, living in a place like Sydney, there's going to be a lot of people that live here that have relatives overseas, whose relatives die overseas, and they themselves are living here. So if someone does come to the Imam requesting for a janazah al-ghaib, then a person should use his hikmah and say that this is a circumstance where it is reasonable to do because of the environment that we are living in and the ikhtilaf of the madhahib. So a person should not be very strict over this matter. The deceased should have had ghusl done to them. Okay, this is a condition for the janazah to be valid. So if the deceased did not have ghusl, then the ghusl should be done and the janazah should be repeated. We'll come to the situation where if a person is buried without a janazah, what happens? We'll do that inshallah. The janazah should be in front of the congregation. So let's say the qibla is this way, right? The janazah, the mayyit should be here, the janazah is over here facing the qibla. It should not be that they are facing the qibla and the mayyit is behind them. Okay, it sounds funny, but the fuqaha have discussed this. Because the people should be standing, it is a condition that they should not be riding a camel or a horse or whatever and be praying the janazah. They have to be off their beast and standing. The mayyit should be placed on the ground, meaning that it should not be, people are carrying the mayyit and standing there whilst everyone is praying on the deceased. That should not happen. The mayyit should be placed on the ground. Here we have a portable stool and it is placed on that, and that is acceptable. If, for example, the ground is, let's say, there's an earthquake in Turkey, right? And 6,000 people have died and perhaps more than that will come. It becomes difficult that you have an organized funeral. So what will often be happening is that there's the rubble and the earthquake and the person is being prayed over right there and then, right? And so if there's considerations that, for example, the ground is muddy or it is difficult to put the mayyit on the floor, then they can be on top of something. Or if there is a fear that the najasa might come on the floor, then again it can be on top of something. Those are the conditions of the janazah. Any questions so far?
Is it possible to have a number of people at one time?
Yep. We'll come to that inshallah. We'll do that in the notes section inshallah.
Sometimes the body is in an ambulance and they just park the ambulance in front. That's right.
I mean, that is an example of a deceased that is on a carriage. So it should be removed from the carriage and placed on the ground to be prayed over, right?
Many times we have seen this.
Yes, I understand that. That's why you're learning the rules, right? He was before you, yes?
What if the deceased body is never found, like drowned in the ocean?
Yes.
Is that the same concept?
So the same concept will be that the deceased should be present, except that Imam al-Shafi'i says that janazat al-ghaib is permitted.
Okay, so
right?
if they can't find the body?
So if the Imam al-Shafi'i or the people praying over al-Shafi'i, then it is valid. If they're Hanafi, it's not valid. You had the same question. So the general principle will apply, that the deceased has to be there. Let's say there was a bomb or there was a airplane crash and only parts of the body can be found, right? Sometimes only the skull is found and the person is identified based on the teeth, right? If they have dental records, for example. Then that part of the body is prayed over, right? And if they didn't find anything at all, then there is no janazah because they didn't find any body at all.
For example, if I learned a month ago or some time ago,
Yes.
has passed away the person, but
There's no janazah has been prayed. So that's the same situation if the person is buried. We'll do that in the notes when we come to that, inshallah. Let's move on. So I think there's a lot of questions around the notes, so we'll cover that, inshallah. What are the sunnahs? Where should the imam start is the first sunnah. The imam should start at the chest level. And why is that? Because that's where the heart is. Now, there's ikhtilaf between the madhahib on where the imam stands. Okay, in the Hanafis, you stand at where the chest level is. Imam Shafi'i says that if it is a male, then the imam should be standing at the head level, so in front of the head. Okay, and that's why we take care that the head is on this side, the feet is on this side, and we are praying in that direction, right? Okay, so that the imam stands in front, in line with the head. However, the imam is a Hanafi, he will line in front of the chest. If it is a female, then it is in line with the hips, according to Imam Shafi. Imam Abu Hanifa does not make a difference between the genders. When you do the first takbirah, the hand is raised. Allahu Akbar. The other three Imams, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, say that the arms are raised, hands are raised with all four takbirah. Okay? That the Imam should say it aloud. Allahu Akbar. Enough that the people can hear him. And when he says Assalamu alaikum, he should also say that aloud as well. These are all the sunnahs. Imam Abu Hanifa says that the hands are raised with only the first takbirah. There is a secondary opinion within the madhab that a person may raise the hands for all takbirat, just like he does in Eid. Do you remember last week we said in Eid that he raises the hands with all the takbirahs? Remember that? So he may do that in the funeral prayer as well. After the first takbirah, Imam Abu Hanifa says that he should do the thana only. Imam Shafi'i says that he should do the Fatiha only. So he says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Then he goes into the rest of a Fatiha. He does not do the thana. Imam Abu Hanifa says he does not do the Fatiha and he does the thana. He can choose to recite the Fatiha. If he recites the Fatiha, it should be with the intention of a dua, not with the intention of recitation of the Quran. And it is not permitted to do any recitation or surah after the Fatiha. It's not permitted in the funeral prayer. Okay? And there is no sajdatul sahu in the funeral prayer. There's no way you can correct a mistake. So we had the situation in this masjid that someone said that you should do the thana and the Fatiha. And I said, no. Imam Shafi'i says it is the Fatiha alone. In fact, it is written very clearly that the thana is not done because the funeral prayer is meant to be a brief prayer, not meant to be a long prayer. So even the thana, which is so short, right, is left out because it should be a brief prayer. And even in general, what you see the Imams doing is that they do a brief dua. They don't do a very long dua. And the duas that you have already memorized. So the Shafi'i praying behind the Hanafi Imam is doing a thana. What will the Shafi'i person do? He will read the Fatiha because he has to complete the rukn for himself. Just like he has to read the Fatiha behind the Imam in a regular prayer. Okay. So the point I mentioned previously is that the Shafi'i said that the Fatiha is a rukn, and now the Hanafi Imam is not praying the Fatiha. So is his prayer valid behind the Hanafi Imam?
Yeah.
Yes, why?
The Imam's prayer is valid.
If the Imam's prayer is valid, then the Muqtadi's prayer is valid. And it is permitted within the Shafi'i madhab to follow an Imam of another madhab without condition. Okay? The only condition that the Shafi'is place, which is a general condition, is that if the Imam does not have tahara, does not have wudu, then your prayer will not be valid. How will you know that? The Imam said Allahu Akbar, and you can see that there is urine on the back of his clothes, and he is unaware of it. Okay, you can see it, right? Then you know he doesn't have tahara, right? Then your prayer will not be valid. So that's what you do after the first takbirah. After the second takbirah is the Ibrahimiyya, which is the prayer on the Prophet ﷺ and his family that we do after the tashahud in the prayer. After the third takbirah is the dua over the deceased and the people who have gathered. And there are multiple du'as that you can memorize, and they are all, manqul from the Prophet ﷺ, and there's no issue with using one or the other. There are preferences among the madhahib of which dua to read. However, these are preferences rather than strict things. So you may decide to even read 2 or 3 of the duas that you have memorized. And this is something that a person should try and keep memorized, because you never know that you come to the masjid and there's going to be a janazah prayer. So there's no time to go and revise dua, right? It should be something that you retain, you regularly revise so that it remains in your memory. After the fourth takbirah, there is no dua. You do taslima. A person may choose to say رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and then do the taslima after that. So a very short dua after the fourth takbirah. You're looking confused. Are you confused? You got it? Okay. So just to recap, after the first takbirah, the thana, which is the dua that we read when we open the prayer, or the Fatiha. After the second takbirah is the Ibrahimiyya. After the third takbirah is the dua for the mayyit and the gathering. And after the fourth takbirah, there is no dua, and you say Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. 2 taslima. Clear?
Not one.
2.
In Makkah they do one.
They do 1, right? Because Ahmad bin Hanbal says 1. That's Hanbali. They're following the Hanbali madhab for that. Okay? And that's what confuses people, and they get confused over what they should be doing, because when they go to Umrah, that's the first time in their life they prayed a janazah prayer, right? So, and you pray it so many times, and that's what you remember. But Imam Shafi says 2, Imam Malik says 2, Imam Abu Hanifa says 2 as well. Okay? If the Imam, by mistake, does a 5th takbirah, then he will not be followed. Okay? Just like if the Imam stood up for a 5th rak'ah, he is not followed. Alright? You stay sitting down. Okay, let's go into notes. Who will lead the prayer? The fuqaha have ikhtilaf over the matter. Very simply is the person who is so the Hanafis say the person that is most at right to lead the prayer is the sultan or his delegate, so like the governor or the qadi, if those are not present. If those are not present, then it is the imam of the locality. Okay, so for example, there's a mayyit in this masjid, then who should be leading the prayer? The imam should be of this masjid, should lead the prayer. If the imam is not present, then it can be the male guardian of the deceased. And in the Shafi'i madhab, the person at most right to lead the prayer is the male guardian of the deceased. Did I say patient or did I say deceased? I said patient. I think that's what's in my mind right now. So, but it should be the male guardian, and he can designate the imam to lead the prayer. Any of these people who have the most right can designate someone else to lead the prayer. Just like the imam of the masjid can designate someone else to lead a regular prayer even when he is present. That will be allowed and valid. Okay, if a person is buried without a janazah, so during COVID there were Muslims that were buried without a janazah and without a ghusl, and sometimes what happens is that a person is not known to be a Muslim, and it so happens that he is buried without people realizing that he was a Muslim, and the next day someone says that, oh, so and so was actually a Muslim and he did not have a ghusl and he did not have a janazah. So what will be done now? Because he is already buried, he will not be removed to have the ghusl. It's too late for that, but the janazah will be prayed over him. If the person has some certainty that the body has not started to decompose, so let's say a month has gone by, then in general the body will have decomposed in a month's time. Then the janazah will not be prayed over at that time. If it's a short number of days, in general the body has not started to decompose at that time, so a janazah can be prayed over the body. If there are multiple deaths and you are doing a janazah, there are 2 options. One is you can do a janazah for each individual person, and that is the preferred. However, if let's say there's a lot, let's say there's 40 people that are died, then you can do 1 janazah for all of those people. And so this is what you see happening in Mecca and Medina, and that they will say as-salatu ala al-amwat. And if you go and see, there are 5 or 6 bodies that are coming, and one janazah is prayed for all of those people in one go. So that is valid. How will that happen? So let's say I am the imam. I will have the males closest to me, then the boys, then the women, then the girls. Okay, in that order. Or the imam may decide that he has the men, and then to the left the boys, and then to the left the women, and then further to the left the girls. So he can have them stacked in front of him, and if that's not possible, he can have them stacked to the left. The imam should ask for 3 rows as the optimal number, or odd number of rows. So they say that even if there's only 7 people, that you make 3 rows from 7 people. Okay? So how will you do that? You will put 3 in the front, and then 2, and then 2. Right? So, we frequently have in this masjid that there's a janazah after dhuhr, there's barely one saf of people. And so you gather the people and you make them into 3 rows for the janazah. If the person arrives late for the janazah, what does he do? Right? So in a regular prayer, you join the imam where he is at that point. And that's the same thing that you do with the janazah. So let's say you walked in and they're doing the 3rd takbirah. You join and you would do what you would do after the 3rd takbirah. Which is what? Dua on the mayyit. Right? Then you do the 4th takbirah, the imam does taslima, you don't do taslima, and you make up your 2 takbirat that you missed. Just like you would do in a regular prayer. Are you confused? You're just concentrating. Okay. The difference is that if a person is in the masjid, okay, and for whatever reason, the imam said Allahu Akbar, and he was daydreaming, okay, all right, and then the imam does a 2nd takbirah, and then he realizes, oh no, I've missed a takbirah, okay, and then he will join the prayer from where the imam is at, and he does not need to make up anything. So he is counted as having joined from the beginning, just like someone who joins in the ruku'. Okay, an interesting point. Imam Abu Hanifa and his 2 students, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani, all 3 of them said that it is makruh to do a janazah inside the masjid. Okay? But understand this mas'ala carefully. Imam Malik also says that it is makruh to do inside the masjid. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal also says it is makruh to do inside the masjid, but he has conditions. And in general, he allows it. Within the Hanafi madhab, we have a big debate. And the debate is whether it is makruh taharimi or makruh tanzihi. There's no other debate. Okay? So it's not a debate of whether it's permissible or not. The debate is, what kind of makruh is it? All right? And so, for example, major figures in the Hanafi madhab, Ibn Humam, one of the greatest commentators of the Hidayah, says that it is makruh tahrimi. And in general, that's what the madhab has taken. So my wife is studying, and she says to me, what are you guys doing in the masjid? It's like, it says in Quduri that it is makruh. I said, okay, that's fine. This is the difference between someone who, has knowledge and someone who has applied knowledge. You have to have applied knowledge, right? And how do you get applied knowledge? It's, sitting with the people who have been there and done it. There's something within the madhab which is called urf. And that urf is what is commonly done by the people. If we don't do the janazah in the masjid, where will we do it? Sorry? Qubur. It's difficult to gather that many people, right? So someone can say, okay, we can do it outside, but we actually don't have the space outside because it's not permitted to pray on the sidewalk or the road or in a public open area, right? So the reality is that in most Hanafi countries, they actually pray in the masjid. Even though our madhab said it is makruh. Because Imam Shafi'i permits it, it is allowed to do. Do you understand this? Because it's an ijtihadi ikhtilafi mas'ala, and the urf is that everyone is doing it, then it is permitted to do. So none of you should say that, oh, the Hanafi say it is makruh, we should not do it here in the masjid, we should be doing it in the car park. It has, there is ease in the matter. There should not be something that is. If there is, however, a facility in the city that is easy to access where people can publicly play a janazah, so there's a musalla just for janazah prayer, that is where the janazah should be done. The benefit of doing it in the masjid is that there are people here who have come to pray the regular prayer, and then they will get the reward, and there are more people that pray on the mayyit than would otherwise happen.
When you say masjid,
Yes.
so that's the inner masjid, like not the outer masjid.
Correct. Yes. So in India and Pakistan, they have an outer courtyard, and they built it specifically because that's not counted as the masjid, and you can do the janazah prayer there, and you cannot do i'tikaf in that section. Okay, you have to do the i'tikaf in the inner part of the masjid. And same thing, I believe, in Turkey and Iran and other places, they have that similar kind of system. But a lot of places don't have that. He was before you, and he raised his hand. So I have to train you all.
I've been to a few
Yes.
funerals, and a lot of janazas were prayed at the cemetery.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, you can do that, but it's not preferred. You can do that though, because for example, someone who's buried, right? You can pray the janazah prayer there, right? So it can be done, but there is a difficulty in praying in the janazah because of the lack of space in general in a cemetery. Yes, I'll come to you after him. Yes.
So one thing which I've seen is like the body is kept outside the mosque.
Yes.
And there is a door. They open the door. The people are.
Yes, yes, and I've seen that happen in Pakistan, and they do that because of the lack of space in the courtyard. But I've been to other masajid where the whole majma'a goes outside and they pray in the courtyard. Yes. So yes, that's correct. So as I said, Imam Shafi allows it, and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal allows it with conditions. So the ones that say that it is makruh is Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa. However, the urf is that all over the world it is prayed inside the masjid. So it's not something that should be made into an issue, just something for you to be aware of. If someone debates you in the matter, then you can say that there is ikhtilaf in the matter, and the urf is that it is done everywhere. So I use urf as an Arabic word. Do you guys understand what urf means, or do I need to? Tradition, yes, tradition. Good. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Look, it's for the COVID patients, exceptional situation. So that is not required, or?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a situation like that where there is a need, just like someone has to be standing to pray the janazah prayer, but where he is sick, he cannot stand, he will sit down, right? So the condition is that the mayyit should have ghusl, but if there's a need, the pandemic means that a ghusl cannot be done, then the janazah is done without the ghusl, right? If the pandemic means that I have to stand 20 meters away from a mayyit, then that's what I have to do. So the need, creates that allowance.
So all this janazah prayer done, is it for the mayyit or for the musalli? Like, will it increase any virtue for the mayyit, the way we pray, or the way we miss or make any mistake?
That's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, it comes under the category of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ prayed over the mayyit, and one of the Sahabi who was the Rawi, he heard him do the dua, right? And this is another evidence that when you do a sirri prayer, it is loud enough that you can hear it yourself, right? And also, the person next to you may be able to hear it, right? Because that's how a sirri prayer is done. I think there's an overemphasis that the sirri prayer should be quiet. But anyway, I digress. The Sahabi says that when he heard the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I wished I was the mayyit. Right? Now, would anyone us wish that the Prophet ﷺ was praying over us? Yes. Right? So, from that point of view, it is virtuous. Right? So, if he has good people praying over him, then that is beneficial for the mayyit because it's a source of forgiveness and reward for him. Right? Because what is the funeral prayer? It is asking for his forgiveness and nur in his qabr, and that the people who are left behind him are given ease, and etc., etc. Right? So those are all things that are important. Sorry. Yes.
If I knew someone, he refused to pray Salah time, I knew him, so I traveled from a friend. He didn't want to pray. Oh, he refused.
He refused?
Yeah, he refused.
Yeah.
So he can pray the Salah Janazah?
There's ikhtilafi matter on him. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah said that the janazah is not prayed over him. And even the Hanafi madhab, there's two opinions, one that is prayed over and one that is not prayed over. Because the prayer is the sha'air of Islam, right? It marks who is a Muslim and who is not a Muslim, who is a munafiq, who is not a munafiq. So it's an ikhtilafi matter. Did you have a question as well?
No.
Okay. A child that is born alive is washed and given the kafan and prayed over. Okay? The child, they were born alive and then they died, even if they were alive for a few moments. They showed any sign of life. Usually the most common sign of life is that the baby cries. Okay? The only crying that the parent is ever happy about is the crying of the newborn. After that, they don't like it anymore. I did obstetrics for a few weeks, and it used to be a great source of happiness that we heard the baby crying, because usually our whole stress was get the baby out alive, right? And so if they are born alive, even if it is for a few months, then the whole thing is done. The ghusl, the kafan, and the prayer. If, however, the child is born dead, what is known as a stillborn child, okay? The whole delivery process happens, but it was not alive, then the fetus is washed and given a kafan, but not prayed over, because they were not alive. One thing to mention here is that when you do the janazah of children, you do not ask for their forgiveness. There's a different dua for children. Why is that? Because children are masum, they are innocent. Right? So there's a different dua that you ask for Allah to give mercy and a source of shafa'ah for the parents, and that Allah replace the child with another child, those kinds of dua. Yes.
What about the children that aren't Muslim?
Yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah, I was preparing for this and I thought someone will ask me this, right? This is a matter of aqidah, and it's a difficult one. Even Imam Abu Hanifa, there are something like 14 or 15 masail that he chose not to give an opinion on, and this was one of those. He said, well, what happens to the child of a kafir? Does he go to Jannah or he doesn't go to Jannah? And he chose to be quiet on this matter. And I think that's the way to go. We don't pray janazah on them, right? The only time we do pray janazah on them, if the child was captured, lived in a Muslim land, and he died in captivity as a child, but he was a child of a kafir, right? But because he dies as a child in a Muslim land, he is prayed over, and the assumption is that he will go to Jannah as a result of that. Wallahu a'lamu bis-sawab. I don't know the real answer. These are from the masail that when you go to Jannah, you can ask. Yes.
What if someone kept his deen quietly,
Yes.
right? And his family doesn't know that he's a Muslim, but they buried him as in their own way. Maybe they cremated him, whatever. Nothing was done as per Islamic way. Is there anything for the Mayyit or for the Muslims?
The fard kifaya is for the condition that someone is known as a Muslim, right? That's how I asked, how do you know someone is a Muslim? And so one of the conditions was shuhra, famous, that he's known to be a Muslim. So someone is, let's say, has hidden his Islam from everyone in the world. How am I going to pray janazah on him? Okay? So his status is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But there is no fard on me because I did not know that he was a Muslim. There are classes of people that janazah is not done over. One that we mentioned, the person who does not pray. And there is an opinion from some of the ai*imah that he is not prayed over. There is no prayer over a rebel. What is a rebel? A rebel is a person who fights against the sultan. Do we have an Islamic Khalifa? No. There is no janazah over the murderer. There is no janazah over a terrorist. Okay? This is so that the people are given a warning not to do that. Also, a person who is killed in a family feud is not prayed over either. All right? And this is to show the people of the severity of what they have done, that they have fought their own family. Yes. If the person has committed suicide, the general principle is that he is prayed over.
Yes.
He is prayed over. That's the general principle. But understand that there is ikhtilaf in the matter, and some of the ai*imah have said that he is not prayed over. So for example, Imam Abu Yusuf said that he is not prayed over, but in general the Hanafis have said that he is prayed over, regardless of whether he committed suicide because of severe pain or whether he committed suicide because of a mental illness. And the mental illness person is, the pen is lifted from him regardless. Obviously, it has to be the kind of mental illness that counts as junoon, right? Not all kinds of mental illness counts as junoon. So someone who has anxiety is not considered junoon. He has waswas, that's not junoon. Someone who has schizophrenia is not in control of his faculties. And so that's generally where you see the mental patients killing themselves, is when they have schizophrenia. So the pen is lifted from those people, and the janazah may be prayed over that person. The person with the mental illness who has a true mental illness, he is like the child. We also do not ask for maghfirah for him because he is forgiven automatically. That's all I had for the funeral prayer. Any outstanding questions? Yes?
Evolution and how of the place?
Yes.
What's the relevance for funeral prayer?
The conditions of the prayer, of the funeral prayer, regarding the place and the wudu and all of that is the same as the regular prayer. So I need to have wudu, I need to be clothed, I need to be facing the qibla. All those same kinds of things like we do with the regular prayer. Yes?
So the dua you do,
You need to speak up because the AC is...
I'm saying the dua that you would have to do in takbirah.
Yes.
Do it in your language as well?
In general, the prayer needs to be done in Arabic. Right? And so you should do an effort to learn the dua in the Arabic language. Just like we do that in the regular prayer. You can't do it in Persian or Urdu in the regular prayer, right? Except for the person who is unlettered, he doesn't know anything, then yes, he's allowed. Yes.
You said terrorist.
Terrorist, yes.
Okay. So the terrorist, according to the definition of Islam?
Of course. Why will I teach you the definition of George Bush? It's a fiqh class, it's not a science class. What is a terrorist? Okay, Allah has defined in Surah Al-Ma'idah that the person who desires fasad on the earth, right? This is the very next ayah after the ayah of the two sons of Adam alayhi salam, one who killed the other. All right. And Allah says that for that person who does fasad on the earth, then cut off their arms and their legs, right? Except for the one who does tawbah. So that is a terrorist. So Allah defined the terrorist before George Bush did. It's not, we don't use their definition.
Who's the rebel?
He raised his hand. I know you are older, but he has. Okay, khalas, I'll give you. Go ahead. What is a rebel? A rebel is a person who fights the Khalifa, the recognized Khalifa. Okay? That all of the land accept as the Khalifa, and he goes to fight against him. And the Khalifa does not have to be a person who is a pious person. He may actually be a fasiq, but that does not allow rebellion against him.
So anybody who is fighting a Muslim, because we don't have today Khalifa.
Correct?
But, who is fighting Muslim?
Who is fighting the Muslims, right? You know,
He's claiming himself as a Muslim.
yeah, that becomes a long discussion around terrorism in Muslim lands, and what is defined as that, and the general principle will be that a Muslim land that does not have a Khalifa is like a de facto, right? It's like a de facto Muslim land, and so those laws will still apply. And this is where Al-Qaeda and ISIS have taken hold, because they've come up with their own rules, right? Because it's something that hasn't existed for us. One of the big issues that we have amongst Muslims is that we've always had a Khalifa. So all our books of fiqh always describe that it will be the Sultan that will lead the prayer, it will be the Sultan that will give the khutbah, it will be the Sultan that will do this, right? And that's what we find in our history. So when we no longer have a Sultan, we are stuck, because all our books, just everyone's saying the same thing. But so it will go back to saying that whoever is the ruler of a Muslim land is acting like a sultan, right? Even though he is not considered the Khalifa, right? And so the person who goes and fights him is considered a rebel from that point of view.
When
However,
Muslim countries is colonized,
yes,
they are fighting the colonial rule.
that is different. If I am fighting the British or the French or the Italians who have, was it the Italians that conquered Somalia, or was it was the Italians, right? So if you're fighting the Italians, then that is considered pure jihad, right? Because you are fighting the invaders. So the Muslims in Afghanistan that were fighting the soldiers there is considered jihad. There's no other term for it. It's not rebellion. They are fighting invaders who are non-Muslims. What else is that but jihad?
In this case, the invader is usually also some Muslims, local Muslims. So
Those Muslims are considered munafiqeen.
they cannot be brave.
Those Muslims are considered munafiqeen, in that they are, and this is something that we discussed in Surah An-Nisa, right? Is that there are multiple ayat mentioned in Ali Imran and Surah An-Nisa on this subject, that if you are supporting the kuffar, you are against the Muslims in that matter.
What about a Muslim person who's murdered someone and repented and then is buried, and can they still pray janazah?
Good question, very good question. I read something on this and I do not remember the answer right now. Let me get back to you, inshallah, next week.
Who's been in that situation?
Yes.
End up praying janazah on this person.
Yes, I believe that is the answer, but I don't want to give the wrong answer. Let me check it and get back to you next week. I read something, but it's just not in my memory right now. Yes.
Two questions. Loosening of the hands.
Okay.
End of control.
Okay.
It should be done once the taslima is done, or because there's, I remember there's some difference. Like once you do the right, you should lose the hand.
Okay.
You have completed like right.
I did not read anything around this. Let me check that and get back to you, inshallah, because I did not see it in the books, and I did not hear that either. Yes.
One more.
Sure.
Normally, in our culture.
Yes.
Once the funeral service is over,
Yes.
there is another dua normally in the native language.
Sure.
Is that like that's again